everybody. Welcome back to the Coming of Cage podcast. I'm your host, Derek, and I have my other host, Ryan, here with me. Hey, buddy.
Hello.
Hello, hello. And we are the Nicolas Cage movie review podcast where we spin a wheel to find out which Nicolas Cage movie we review next on the show. Last episode, we did Teen Titans Go to the Movies. This episode, we're doing 2014's Left Behind.
We went from a masterpiece of animated cinema to a
Different kind of movie.
Yeah, to something that's not.
But it is, for those who are curious, it is based on the book that was popular back then. And funny enough, there are several attempts at making Left Behind movies. And oddly enough, this is the lowest rated one on IMDb of all of them.
Yeah.
This one is the lowest rated. I just want to, Left Behind 3, World at War, okay, is rated higher than this movie. That's where we're at here.
I would probably believe that, having seen this movie.
The synopsis for the film is a small group of survivors is left behind after millions of people suddenly vanish and the world is plunged into chaos and destruction, which is not inaccurate for what happens in the movie, but doesn't.
But it's also not accurate.
It's also not accurate. That's right. Somehow it's considered action, fantasy, sci-fi. So for those playing at home, so that's kind of weird there. And yeah, it stars Nicolas Cage. Lea Thompson has a role in it.
For about 3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. Mark Kleba, who people might know. And Nicky Whelan. Ryan, do you recognize Nicky Whelan?
No.
So she was the kind of seductress love interest in Inconceivable.
Oh God.
Which we reviewed way back early on, like episode, I think 6.
I mean, she did look familiar, but I didn't really place her.
Yeah, the trivia when we did Inconceivable, one of the pieces of trivia was that the two of them played love interest twice, and this is the other time. So there you go. But anyway, Ryan, why don't you take everybody through how we normally do an episode here?
I take notes throughout the movie, and then we discuss those notes and try and go kind of chronologically through the movie and discuss the various things that did or did not happen in the movie. This one, some people might think about it as taking place during the rapture, but I prefer to think about it as this is an MCU movie that takes place in the air, or they're in the air, and we get to see how a plane handles it when Thanos snapped. It makes it a much better movie if you think about it that way, but
not enough people vanish though for that to happen.
Well, I mean, it's not 50-50 in every single place in the world. Some places are going to be 70%, some places are going to be 10%,
You're right, and in the case of the Avengers, just the original 6.
Exactly.
So
that's what I'm saying. All right. So yeah, this I guess we should probably just go ahead and lay this out a little bit in the beginning. This is kind of a religious movie. I mean, yes. Religious themes. The rapture is portrayed as the one from the Christian Bible. So Derek, I don't believe you really claim to be any sort of a religious person, not specifically Christian or anything like that, and I personally don't either. So this is going to be kind of a third party look into that.
I have done some study. I've read.
Sure. I mean, I went to church until I was like 12. So I've got history.
My family's Jewish. Yeah. So I went to church when I slept over at friends' houses and their parents made me go.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I have some experience, and based on that experience is why I'm no longer a part of that. But we're not going into this completely like not knowing anything about it, but we do have opinions on it. We're going to try not to get into the weeds on that too much. It's a divisive topic in general, and we don't want to alienate anybody or seem like we're shaming people that believe in something specific. But the movie does raise questions about certain things relating to religion. You can't talk about this movie without getting into some of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, just kind of a warning at the beginning. If you're sensitive to talk about religion or things like that, this might not be the one to listen to. I'd recommend going back and listening to our Teen Titans Go to the Movies one.
Or National Treasure. That was a fun one.
Nah, I mean, I guess, yeah.
I like that one.
No, it was a good episode of the show. Not the movie,
Yeah, yeah, that's what I meant.
whatever. But anyway, okay. So, going into this, Derek had mentioned to me that this was based on like a Christian novel. And I didn't have any idea. I had never heard of Left Behind before. But then like the movie opens in an airport, and the first thing you really see is a woman pulling a book off the shelf called Acts of God.
Mm-hmm.
So right away I'm like, oh man, okay, this is gonna be really heavy handed. I thought there might be some, I don't know. It started off pretty heavy handed. It's the woman ends up playing a small role a little bit later in the movie, the woman that takes that book. But then I don't remember what the transition was. We get a really, really poorly photoshopped family photo.
Oh, right.
Of Nic
Yeah.
Cage with his family. It is
So
real bad. Like we've seen
it
some
is
really
bad.
bad ones. Gone in 60 Seconds comes to mind. Those photos that it plays during the opening credits. This one is much worse than those. I feel like this might be on par with the worst we've seen.
I mean, I would imagine their budget was pretty tight for this, and they had spoilers, had to crash an airplane. So, I would think,
Several.
well, like one like real like set, like the other one's kind of off. Oh, right, the tiny one. I
Yeah.
forgot about the tiny one. So like I would imagine like this says here the budget was 16 million. That's pretty light for any movie made.
I mean, having watched this, I would have guessed the budget was smaller than that. I don't feel like they spent their money well.
Fair enough. I mean, there's a big cast, right? They have to there's a lot of people involved at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I guess kind of the premise, like how the movie opens, right, is that we find out that Nicolas Cage, Captain Rayford Steele, he's a pilot, his daughter Chloe is coming back in town from college to surprise him for his birthday. And we find out that he's not going to be there because he got called into work. And that's when we see the really bad photoshopped photo because Lea Thompson plays his wife. Fun fact, the two of them never share a scene together in this movie, even though they're supposed to be married. But yeah, so the daughter's all very disappointed, and so she decides to stay around at the airport and wait for her father to chew him out.
And that's when we get this woman that bought the Acts of God book showing up. She goes to argue. Like, apparently, there's this famous journalist at the airport, and this woman, he's reported on some like natural disasters that have happened and things like that. And this woman goes up to him and starts yelling at him I guess she wasn't yelling, but she was definitely like overwhelmingly talking at him about rapture and revelations and all these disasters leading into what would be rapture, which is when all the Christians and believers ascend to heaven and all the non-believers don't. So yeah, that's essentially what she's arguing with him about. And Nic Cage's daughter overhears this, and this is the first of several Christian versus. I wrote Christian versus atheist argument, but it wasn't. I don't know that she's necessarily an atheist. Just that she doesn't believe in Christ.
I think it's more of it's kind of a split between people who believe the rapture is a literal thing that will take place, and then just those who don't. Which there are a lot of religious people who believe a lot of the other aspects, but don't necessarily believe that what ends up happening in this movie is what will actually occur at some point.
She in this scene made me believe that she was not a believer of any kind of God, because she goes on to ask, why would this God let these things happen, these bad things, let these people die, let people be separated from their families, things like that. So I think that's why in this case I put Christian versus atheist argument. It made me kind of question, because this is, I think I mentioned 3 or 4 of these throughout these notes. It kind of made me question if they, I mean, I know the novel was, and this whole theme is like based on Christianity, but it almost seemed like the person that was making this movie was not coming at it from a Christian perspective, because it seemed to me, and this may just be my personal belief, that the people that were arguing against Christianity were the ones that were making more sense. Might be my own personal bias, but
Well, I think that's the point. I think the point is supposed to be the argument of the those like me who require empirical evidence of a thing and those who have faith or belief, right? Because I think the crux of this is that Lea Thompson's character has found this belief. I guess it's over the last year or so. I think they say it's about the last year, and she's gone into it supposedly heavily. We don't really get to see a ton of that. There's a little bit of that, but we don't get to see a whole lot of her character for me to have a strong sense of if it's just the characters being upset with her. But I think that's supposed to like drive this wedge right between the mother and the daughter and the husband. And
sure.
So I don't know how much of the daughter's statements in the airport are her real true beliefs and her just being angry with her mother.
I mean, yeah, I know you said that you, to go back to what you originally said, that you think that's the point. The reason why I don't necessarily know if that was like directly the point was because they actually like make it a point to make the Christians that are arguing in these arguments seem crazy. Like it's not just like a nice argument where it's two people discussing something, like you and I discussing something. It's made to be like, this person is crazy, and they call her mom, Nic Cage's wife, crazy several times, and it hurts her feelings. And then this woman at the airport is overwhelming with the way she comes at this person. So I feel like most of the people in these arguments on the Christian side come across as crazy, which makes me go, that's what made me go, maybe this person is trying to like make something that was a Christian based thing less, make the Christians look crazy, even though,
having not read the book, I can't say.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that way in the book.
It might be an attempt to put those religious people in like an underdog position, right?
Potentially,
since they end up in this movie universe being shown to be right. Vic Armstrong, doesn't have like a huge directing catalog, so it's hard to say. Really, like, I mean, half of his directing catalog is young Indiana Jones. So I don't really know if there was a strong religious background in those making the movie or not.
Yeah, I don't know either. We're gotten into the weeds a little bit on that, but I mean, that's going to be a recurring theme throughout the movie. I feel like after that argument, we get to our first glimpse of Nic Cage removing his wedding ring, which is another theme that happens in these movies, Nic Cage movies, a lot. And if you follow our bingo series, then you know that on our card is Nic Cage is an asshole, and pretty much yeah, that taking off your wedding ring is pretty much enough to have me go, okay, right there, he's playing an asshole in this movie. So yeah,
but it didn't take long for him to double down on that either. So
no, I mean, there's this other, it's funny, he rolls up in like this brand new Saab, like black Saab convertible, and then this flight attendant that he's like trying to have an affair with, she's rolling in like this beat ass green Ford Taurus of some kind that's just rusted out and dented and everything, but they walk in together and he's clearly flirting with her, and his daughter sees,
and she's like clearly into it too. This is Nicky Whelan's character, by the way. Her name is Hattie.
But while those two are walking in, there's a scene that happens in the airport of Nic Cage's daughter, Chloe, having a conversation, because the journalist that the Christian woman had the art was like the thing with, and that she came over and interrupted, has sought her out, followed her in this airport, and has a really fucking terrible, like, I don't like using the F word too many times on this program, but it was really bad. Like the acting in this scene is some of the worst we've seen in any of these Nic Cage movies, and also the way it was directed, because there's a lot of cuts. Anytime anybody speaks, the camera cuts to their face. Cut. It's like, if you can imagine a 10-minute long conversation where it's just cut. They're not in the same,
Mm-hmm.
uh they're not on the same screen. You can see the back of one of their head and the other person's face, but it literally just keeps cutting, and almost every conversation in this movie happens that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very frustrating, at least for me. Did that bother you? Because it was very frustrating for me.
I mean, I wouldn't say that it bothered me at this point. Like, I went into this movie very like I had certain expectations, and so I feel like it was just kind of falling into a lot of my expectations. To be fair, though, like I didn't recognize this guy, but I talked to my wife after I watched the movie, and she knows who he is. So this is Chad Michael Murray. He's been in things like One Tree Hill. He was in the Freaky Friday remake. People probably know him. I had no idea who he
I didn't know
was.
who he was either.
You know,
I just assumed he was like a CW actor.
I mean, he was in Riverdale for a bit.
Nailed it.
Just
Yeah.
to be fair, so like you're kind of on point there. So I just this movie, other than a few small things, this kind of fit all of my expectations going into it.
Fair enough. I try to go in with like not a ton of expectations. I'm rooting. Listen, this is a phenomenon I kind of talked to somebody about earlier today. When we've watched this many movies with Nick, I actually feel like I have a little bit of a connection to him, which is weird and probably would be really weird for him. But like it's like I'm rooting for a friend in these movies. Like I want these movies to be good because I enjoy seeing him succeed in these things because I feel kind of close to him, as weird as it is. We've spent a lot of time with him over the last year,
Mm-hmm.
through watching his movies. And so when a movie comes out on like this, it's a 3.1 on IMDb. I'm hoping for the best in it. And unfortunately, he was the best in it, which is good for him. But everything else was pretty terrible. So the only expectation I have going into these movies is that I'm hoping that he's gonna just kill it,
That's
and that
fair.
maybe carry the movie on his shoulders. I don't think even his immense skill in acting could carry this movie because it was just really bad, even as good as he was. Anyway, yeah, we get after the scene with the two of them flirting that's really, really bad. Nic Cage notices her while he's flirting with the flight attendant coming up like an escalator,
Mm-hmm.
and notices his daughter, and so he walks over, and his daughter introduces him to this journalist that she met 2 minutes ago, and then the journalist excuses himself,
His
and they
name's
sit down.
Buck Williams,
Buck
by the
Williams,
way.
he excuses himself, and then Cassi Thomson or Chloe Steele and Rayford Steele sit down at the table to have a conversation where he's like, I'm sorry that I'm not going to be able to come to this thing, blah, blah, blah. I'm getting pulled out, to go to Europe or wherever he was
London.
going,
They're going to London.
London.
Yeah.
So I can't come. And, she tries to believe him. I think maybe at this point she knows her dad. She wants to believe him, it seems like, but there's always that in the back of her mind, he's probably lying about something. Yeah,
Well,
my next
because she
no,
does.
this
Oops,
dialogue is terrible.
she does bring up how like she thought he like left the family, left her mother, and all that because things have been tough over the last year. So I think she was more. She's like happy he's not abandoning the family, but still doesn't really believe what he's saying.
Right.
Right. So
And the
it's
dialogue was
sad.
real bad. That was my next
Yeah.
notice. The dialogue is really terrible.
Yeah. I do wonder how much of it's just lifted from the book.
Yeah, and I mean maybe that's part of it, but at that point they probably should have had somebody look at it and go, this doesn't, because dialogue in a book is different.
Yeah.
You can't always directly translate that to a movie and have it feel right
Mm-hmm.
or feel natural. And in this case, that may be what it was. They just lifted it directly, didn't have anybody do any like actual writing passes on it, and called it good. So yeah, they have their conversation, and Rayford Steele walks away to go to do his job to
Mm-hmm.
fly. And then Buck Williams just shows up again. Like, if so, my next note was, did he just creepily wait for Dad to leave?
Oh yeah, he's like sitting at like the table behind her. Like at this point, right? It's really just the fact that he's like famous and extremely attractive that is making this not creepy.
I mean, it was still pretty creepy to
You
me,
know what I mean?
but
Yeah, but
yeah,
like
she's in love with it. She's ready to go.
Well, because like everybody seemingly knows this guy. Like I'm not like I don't know how many investigative reporters I would just know by bumping into them somewhere, but like everybody knows this guy.
Right, yeah. They
Yeah.
all, if they don't know his face, they know his name.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they have another conversation, and then he has to get on his flight, which
Which
just conveniently happens to be the flight her dad is flying on.
oh
And so, right as he's getting right onto the flight, this person comes up to Chloe, his daughter, Nic Cage's daughter, and hands her U2 tickets that she's supposed to give to her father for a concert that's happening in London.
so I was so confused by this for a while because the way he hands her the tickets is that she thinks the tickets are for her,
Yeah.
right? Because she says something about wow, he was able to actually get them. But then the guy makes a comment about how it's been like 2 weeks or whatever. But then Nick ends up giving the tickets to the flight attendant so that it's in London. Like I don't know who the tickets were supposed to be for.
I don't know. I just assumed that this scene was meant to establish that he never intended to spend time with his family and that he
Right.
always intended to go to London and go to this concert with his mistress.
Yep. To be. They
To
haven't hooked up
mistress
yet.
to be, yeah, because
Yeah.
they haven't actually made it yet.
Right.
Um, yeah, so she says she writes him a little note on this envelope and gives it to Buck Williams, her new beau, and says, "Will you
They're
give this to my
buddies.
dad since you're on the plane?" And he's like, "Of course I will." So keep in mind, this movie. I want to be very clear about this next part. It's this was released in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow, post 9/11, this dude is able to just walk up to the pilot cabin without any kind of anything stopping him and hand the tickets to the pilot. In no world would that ever happen. I don't care how good looking or
He's
famous
Buck
you are.
Williams.
Yeah, it's just a little ridiculous. He just like knocks on the cabin door, and Nick is like, "Sure, come on in." There's no
Like,
flight
sup, Captain?
attendants to stop him. Nothing. And it's like, come, okay, guys. I'm willing to stretch, my imagination for the rapture happening and stuff, but a guy walking to the pilot's cabin post 9/11, come on. I can't even buy into that.
No, there's a few things like that. Because, like, yeah, the suspension of disbelief here, right? Like, the crux of the film is the rapture. So we're buying into that's a thing that happens in this universe.
Yeah.
But other things still have to make sense too. So,
Right. And yeah, there's several times in this movie where I'm like, that wouldn't happen post 9/11. Like,
yeah.
how is the daughter in the same area of the person that is supposed to be getting on the flight like immediately?
Well, because she never left that area. So,
Oh, because she got back on from a flight. That's true.
yeah, yeah. So that
Okay,
that
fair
works
enough.
out. That's okay.
That's fair enough. Um, so then we start getting introduced to all the passengers on this plane, right? Because the whole
Really,
movie,
just first class. Which of all the things that happened in this movie, I thought it was very clever that they really focus on that first class group instead of like 300 freaking people.
yeah. But they make sure, I don't know if this isn't this note, but eventually it's revealed that they're essentially just assigning sins to everybody in this first class area.
Well,
We like,
certain people anyway.
yeah, that's true. We get like a alien conspiracy guy that's talking about super jets and
Go
how it's
Mach
using
40.
aliens. Like, yeah, you can travel across the country in 6 minutes. And it has to be alien technology because nothing exists on this planet. And there's several times this guy just randomly pipes up with something about an alien conspiracy. It
Very
doesn't do
bizarre stuff.
anything for the plot at
No.
all, except establish that this guy doesn't believe in God.
He is bizarre though. Like later, he's like, we obviously went into an alternate dimension where these people never
Right.
existed. I'm like,
Yeah,
dude,
we branched into the multiverse. Like, come on. So yeah, then we get another Christian versus non-Christian argument with Chloe and Irene Steele, Lea Thompson.
right? Because she goes
Um,
home.
she goes home, yeah, after the thing with her dad. So that's number two argument for that. Which is not that meaningful of a scene. It they Lea Thompson is a wonderful and talented actress, and they gave her like four scenes in this movie, and I was really disappointed. I wanted more to see more of her character.
I don't know why she's in this.
Yeah, she
Like,
doesn't even need to be in the movie really, but because they got someone that I think is a wonderful actress, I wish they would have given her something to work with, and
right?
they didn't
Yeah.
really.
Agreed. Yeah.
So there's my establishing sinners on plane thing, because there's this little girl in first class with her mom, and she talks about how her daddy plays football on TV and that he hurt his arm, and she's talking to this other passenger that's kind of a he's a little person, and he has like the biggest chip on his shoulder about it.
Hmm.
Um,
This is Martin Kleba,
yes,
who
and
people may know.
he's great in other movies. I did not like his character in this movie. I mean, you're not intended to like him. I just more mean that like he did was argue and create problems for people with no real character development other than he's just angry and makes jokes about himself being short, like that are
Yeah, I mean,
intended to guilt trip the people around him.
he is used in a couple of instances to draw out character points from others, right? Because one of the things this movie is not particularly good at is giving any depth to any of these people, any of
Yeah,
them.
it's just establishing them as sinners and people that don't wouldn't believe in
Right.
God, essentially.
And so he's really just used to get at people enough for that person to reveal a thing about them. Is really
Right,
what.
but the scenes when he's not doing that, he's just making comments intended to make other people feel guilty
Yeah, a lot of the time.
about his lot in life,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was it was mostly just annoying to me. Like, I wouldn't know what it's like to have a condition like that, but he seems for his age to really still be struggling very much with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was hard to believe at that point.
Yeah.
If you've lived your whole life with something like that, then usually at a certain point you've accepted that and found ways to just work with it. And he seems like he's just constantly angry about it. So yeah, anyway, to go back to that, this little girl is telling this information to him, and he writes down the name of this football player that he thinks it is, so that he can make a bet on it
Mm-hmm.
later. So, gambling is one of the sins, or is a sin, I think, in a lot of belief systems. So that was just establishing that. And there's several other people. There's one person that uses drugs, and there's some stuff like that going on. So they just go
There's the
through.
big kind of Texas businessman archetype. Yeah, he's not actually Texan, I don't think, but that type of character.
Yeah, there's a character that I think was intended to be Muslim that everybody thinks is a terrorist.
He's clearly meant to be like the Middle Eastern person in the room.
Yes.
Right. They never straight up say that he's Muslim, but it's implied. This movie walks up to a lot of statements and then turns and goes a different way and just never makes the statement. And his character is an example of that, where they're clearly saying like, this is not a white Christian person. We're not going to tell you what this person actually is, though. You can kind of guess, and then they move on.
Right. And then the character that we were just talking about at one point, like, is acting like this guy's a terror at several points. Yeah. Act like just this guy is a Middle Eastern person, so he must be a terrorist.
Right.
So it's kind of just adds to that shallowness of that whole character.
There is the older couple that kind of did like the way it's handled did bother me. Because so it's this older couple. The woman has dementia or Alzheimer's, some type of situation like that, where she gets confused and she's not sure about what's going on around her, and her husband is there with her, and I'm not sure what sin it is that she's committing, other than not being mentally sound, which seems like a cruel way for that to be handled. Yeah. So that bothered me.
Yeah, there are certain characters where it's kind of ambiguous as to whatever sin or however they're established that this is not a Christian person and they're not handled. But most of the characters in First Class, they try and make very clear they're one way or the other.
She's the one person who like doesn't have control of her mental faculties, and I feel like that's.
I agree with you. I'm not arguing.
Yeah, that one bothered me, I will say.
So we after this we get our first, and this one maybe we'll have to debate this on our bingo card later when we record a video. But then we get a green screen flying.
Yeah, I thought about that.
Poor green screen of flying. Our bingo card specifically says green screen driving,
It
so I
does.
don't know. But yeah, it's a pretty badly green screen flying, and there's several of those scenes after this, but this is the first one we really get to see.
Were the wheels on the ground at any point during that time? Because that.
I mean, they were later on at some point. Um, then we go to the like a mall
Yeah,
where the daughter is with her brother.
her little brother. Yeah,
Yeah, which is Nic Cage's son.
not in real
And
life. His
not in
character.
real life. Yeah, his character. And so they're just wandering around the mall, and we get this dance party, this break dance party with no licensed music. This movie did not spend any money on licensing for music. I mean, they went through the catalog of the cheapest songs that you can get, and they just got all those. And in this case, it's just like, I think it was just like a bunch of people making sounds with their mouths or something. It's like, yeah, it was just really weird to watch a bunch of breakdancers dancing to like a cappella music or something like that. It was just,
Open source music.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, they have like a single like acoustic guitar and a guy just like banging on buckets, and that's what the music was
I'm telling
essentially.
you, all the money went to the airplane stuff in this
I
movie.
I, I have to believe that, yeah.
You know?
Um, I at this point I put a note that said love interest 10 years younger
Uh-huh.
or more, which I put that in there because it's a reference to our bingo card.
Yep.
Then the
Yeah,
Thanos,
she's a lot younger because she's only a few years older than I am.
right?
Like
And
she was born in the 80s.
we brought that up in the Inconceivable review too, that she was, because wasn't she was Nic Cage's love interest in
Yeah.
that too, right?
Uh-huh. And
Yeah,
that was only 3 years after this, 2017, I
right.
think. Yeah.
And then the Thanos snap happens, and it's a little. I think we get the first shot of it in the mall with the
Yeah.
daughter.
Because
Her
she's
brother,
hugging her brother at the time
yeah, and
when
then
it happens.
the way it's handled. Okay, so like Infinity War, or Marvel movies, the people like turn to dust, right, and blow off into the wind. In this movie, they just straight up disappear and leave their clothes there, and
So to be
empty
fair,
clothes.
that is one of the primary interpretations of how it theoretically would happen according to like religious belief. So
Okay, I mean, it's all like you just said,
yeah.
theoretical.
Well, I'm just
It's a
saying, like,
movie, so they could have made it look like anything.
I know, but I think they were, of all of the things in here, right? Like if you're gonna portray it, I think they were trying to be traditional
I
with
think
the
they were trying to
portrayal.
save money because it's very cheap to just have piles of clothes everywhere.
I know, but like it's described that way most of the time. I really think they were
It's
trying to
described that they
be
leave t-shirts and jeans when they get
not
raptured up to
literally
heaven.
t-shirts and jeans, but
Okay.
the way it's described is that it's just the body that vanishes, leaving behind everything else.
You can only walk into heaven if you're naked.
Well, you're not supposed to be able to bring, like, you can't bring it with you mentality, right? Like there's a reason
That's from Christianity and the Bible.
It's not from Christianity, but the belief system is that you can't take any of it with you, right? I mean, even like Jewish people believe that too, like that.
Right, but this isn't Jewish. I mean, this is
no, but Christianity is a step, like the first testament is the Jewish part of the Bible,
right, but we're talking
right?
about Revelations,
So, right, which comes
which
after that. So,
yeah.
But the belief system is that you die, everything stays, your physical stuff stays here. You're not taking.
Well,
your
I'm just
watch
going to take
with
your
you.
word for it because
Right.
I guess I just thought they were trying to save money because that's a really weird way to handle it.
I think that's just a coincidence. It happened to be convenient, but I do think they were trying to be.
It's the least interesting way to handle that from a visual perspective. And since a movie is a visual medium, it was not exciting at all. It was literally just watching a bunch of like clothes collapse onto the floor.
Yeah. I think they were trying to take a grounded approach to something that, is theory.
Or they were just trying to save money because they have to crash planes later. So then we go back to the plane where the same thing has happened, and everybody starts realizing that people are just missing, and for some reason they just start rushing the cockpit. Like a huge crowd of people just like starts going crazy at the cockpit. My next note was, why are they rushing the cockpit? What is the captain gonna do? Like, do they think he was in charge of the whole thing and like made all their people disappear?
I'm unclear, but panic's a panic, right? Like that's
Right.
what,
They
right, by
want somebody to
definition.
blame, and he is the person there with like authority,
Well, and
right?
he's the only one who can theoretically can contact anybody else. And like children are missing, spouses are missing. Like if this actually happened, let's pretend for a moment that it actually occurred, right? It'd be pretty horrifying for the people
Sure.
who were left
Absolutely.
behind, right? So these people are snapping. Nobody knows what's going on. They're not getting any answers. Time does kind of pass here a little bit before they start going kind of crazy. Um,
Well, yeah, there's a time when they're trying to figure out what happened, where these people went.
And I think it literally was a panic. And when you have a panic, people do dangerous things.
Yeah, I just think in 2014 we had internet on planes, so like I feel like they would have, you know,
I mean, this is a made up
surely there's
airline,
somebody with a
but
laptop or a phone that can connect to Wi-Fi still. It's not like everything just disappears when the people disappear.
yeah, I mean that they don't really talk about that. They talk about satellite phones a lot, and none
Right.
of them work, which was a problem that I had because while yes, at some point a human has to be involved in maintaining those programs, 10
They would
minutes.
stay running for a little
Yeah,
while.
like
Yeah.
yeah, they'd be running for a little bit, so that did bother
Maybe
me.
that's something we're missing. Maybe this movie it doesn't explicitly say it, but it takes place in like 2007 or something. So the internet on planes is not available,
Well, the
and
book
that's
is
why.
older, right? And so I think it is harder to adapt that to a modern era where, like, especially if you were to do it now when everybody has a smartphone and every
Yeah.
plane has Wi-Fi, like, because this is a made-up airline at a time where not every plane had Wi-Fi yet, and it cost extra all
Yeah,
the time.
but like this couldn't have taken place before 9/11, so
No,
we couldn't validate our theory with that. But because the cars that they show are too new for that.
and there's an air
But
marshal on board, and that was,
that too. So yeah, it's a weird, like they don't explicitly say the year, but maybe it's implied that it's like 2004 or something. But there's still
no,
cars newer than that, I think.
I think it's
So
supposed to be present day. I think it's just that they, if I'm assuming if the satellite phones aren't working, Wi-Fi is not working.
I guess, yeah, it's just a weird
But
thing. It's not really how Rapture works, I would imagine. Maybe they mentioned that in Revelations too, and you just haven't mentioned it to me. But I don't
that
think
Wi-Fi goes
Wi-Fi.
down.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember that
That's
part.
I think that part of the problem is that the book is a lot older, and so they're trying to adapt this
Yeah,
book, and I think they probably weren't sure what to do with that, and so they just ignored it.
probably, which just causes more problems. But
Yeah,
maybe it's fine for some people. So then we go back to the mall, and she has run out of the mall at this point and is looking at every ambulance she sees. She's like trying to find her brother. She's freaking out trying to find her brother. She goes to get into her father's Saab that I mentioned earlier, because he let her take it, and she found the wedding ring that had been taken off when she was in there. We didn't mention that, but so when she's trying to get into the car, I was actually impressed at this part because they legitimately did this stunt. They literally had what looked to be an actual practical plane crash into the car and explode. Now, later, there's some CGI flames that look really bad,
well, and
but
the actual when the plane's in the air, it looks really bad.
yeah, but the actual like
But
impact
yes,
looked real, which I was impressed with because that's not a cheap
well,
piece to pull
that's what
off.
I'm saying, man. All the money went to the airplanes.
Yeah, I think the airplanes and some of the practical effects are pretty good. Like we'll get into some of the other stuff later, but there's some other big crashes, cars and things doing things that would be dangerous and expensive. So,
Mm-hmm.
so let's see. Yeah, so then we go back to the plane and we get Buck Williams interviewing this grieving mother that just lost her two daughters in
Mm-hmm.
the economy section, asking her how she's feeling and what happened. And it's like, man, have some tact.
Yeah, he's trying to document the moment.
Yeah, by interviewing grieving mothers that are freaking out because their children disappeared. And any respect I had for him, which was pretty minimal at that point, was gone because that's just a terrible thing to do. There's no good reason to do that interview. You're not recording history. You're just ruining somebody's life who will now be in the history books forever. You know what I mean? Like that
I mean,
particular conversation.
like that, if that would end up in a documentary,
Right,
right
exactly.
after the fact. And I think
Multiple
that's,
documentaries. It would be used in every
yeah.
documentary about the thing.
And
And
he would get an award for it.
sure,
I
but
mean,
he all
that's
he's
the
doing
thing.
is
Like,
messing up. Every time she saw that play, she would just be brought back to
yeah,
that
but
moment.
that's his job, is to document those types of things. Like early on when we find out like he's been like he was just where there was a tsunami, and things like he's documenting these things happening. That's part of his job. And it's horrible stuff that he's documenting, but those are the ways we get that type of proof to show other people in the world that these things happened. I
I just
mean,
think that maybe there were other people on the plane that could have given similar information, that maybe hadn't just lost a child or two children, that maybe would have been a little more tactful rather than asking a mother that just lost her two kids how she feels.
maybe nobody knew what was happening either, so like everyone's like just confused. I don't know.
Well, this lady is crying
Yes, no, she's
bad,
clearly
majorly,
upset.
so she knows
Yeah.
that her kids are gone. Um, my next note is short bus crash. Oh yeah, because so the daughter is, after the car gets wrecked by the plane. The daughter runs, and she's just like running and running somewhere. I think trying to get home.
Well, she's on her way
And
to a hospital.
oh, that's what it is. Yeah, because she wanted to
Yeah.
find out if her brother was at the hospital, and she runs like under a bridge for some reason, and this bus like crashes over the edge of the bridge, this short bus,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think there was anybody on it. So I guess with Rapture, it's all children and believers.
Yeah. And there's some logistical questions there about when do you stop being considered a child in this
Right.
context.
Um,
Um,
Whenever God considers that to be like 14, you're done.
I mean, I don't know, right? So are there a bunch of like 17-year-olds running around somewhere,
Maybe her
or
brother was like 10,
yeah,
maybe.
he was young.
So yeah, I mean,
I think
I
they
would
did that
say
on purpose, right? Like
right.
all the children we see disappear are clearly young enough where that's not a question, right? But it does make me wonder, like middle schoolers, high schoolers, like because in the Jewish faith, 13 is when you're quote an adult as far as the religion is concerned, right? You
Right.
have your bar mitzvah, your bat mitzvah, whatever, right? This is obviously not Judaism, but like, what is that number? Is that number 18?
Well, there is an age, at least at the church I attended, where you would get, I can't remember the name for it, but where you would join the church on your own,
Mm-hmm.
confirmed. That's what it
Okay,
was. It was
right, yeah.
confirmation. And I think I was around 12 when I had to go through
See,
that.
that's
And
pretty young,
yeah, and
right?
that's when you're considered old enough to make the decision to join the church for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That now I don't know if that's a universal thing. I that
Right,
may have
yeah.
just been at the church I was at. I'm not sure, but so yeah, I mean I don't know. I think you're probably pretty close to with 13. It's probably 12 or 13 somewhere in there. That's still pretty young.
Right. So that means there's a bunch of 14, 15-year-olds
Yeah,
still
with
running
potentially
around.
no parents or
Like,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. But
So
they
yeah,
really harp on the baby thing. Like there's strollers and stuff everywhere that are just
everywhere.
empty. Yeah.
So yeah, casual racism is my next note, because that's when the Martin Kleba's character just kind of like wanders over and was like looking for a bomb or something. I don't know what he was looking for, but it was implied he was trying to figure out if this guy was a terrorist and that he was responsible for all these people being disappeared on the plane. So casual racism, I don't think I had that on my bingo card, but on this one, but I think that qualifies if you had it on yours. Then we have this weird scene where we're on the plane and Nick's co-pilot has disappeared. He vanished in this whole thing. And so then there's another plane coming straight at his plane.
Yes.
But like the sky is really big.
Well, so there are very specific flight paths that flights take. And since he's going to London, there's really like very few.
Well, at this
flight
point,
paths.
he had turned around.
Right. And so like that's like there's like that other plane was in the same flight path that he was in, just
sure,
behind
but
him.
He is not in an autopilot state at this point.
No, like I think he waited way too long to move out of the flight path.
It's like he was trying to build like tension in the scene as a character in the movie, which is weird.
when nobody's responding, he should have started moving immediately, in my opinion, given the circumstances. But yeah, he waits forever.
Yeah, and his wing clips the tail fin of the other plane, I believe it was, and that plane nobody's responding on the other plane. So clearly the pilots both are gone, and
well, they do give us a shot of the cockpit and it's empty at one point. So yeah,
and so it's a presume that all the passengers are going to die, and they died at this point over the ocean.
I mean, we watch it kind of go down.
Yeah, and including all the people on the plane watch it, and with that hit, now Nic Cage's plane is losing fuel, and has damage to the spoilers or something. I can't remember what he said. It's something used to slow down the plane when he lands.
Spoilers were damaged. Those are the flaps that come up on the wing during landing. But there was also damages to, he called it the elevators. I don't know if that's an official term for it or not, but basically he can't pull up. He can't pull the nose of the plane up, which is two problems. One, you can't just go any higher if you needed to, but also you can't pull the nose of the plane up when you're landing, which is a thing that you need to do when you're landing in water, which you might have to do if there's no airports or fuel.
Right.
So
then my next note is Alien Conspiracy Guy returns.
Jesus.
I don't remember what it, this might have been when he suggested that it was like a multiverse thing or something like that. And then we go back to the land and his daughter, where she is just wandering through a hospital, seemingly with no one else in it.
Well, she broke into like a side window to get into this hospital, which is a very awkward scene to watch. Now, I've never broken a window to break into a place or anything. I got to imagine there's a better way to do it than the way she did it, but it looked uncomfortable. It looked painful and awkward.
And she goes to like the children's wing where where all the children are gone. They're really hammering that hard, like you mentioned. But yeah, when she's walking through all this, there's no one.
No, she comes across one person who's clearly like a new mother who lost her children. Right. And that's a horrible, sad scene. Her entire character is there just to confirm for the audience that all the children are gone.
Yes. It was not fun, but that's the only other person. There's no workers. There's no nothing in this hospital. It's just this one patient that probably just gave birth.
It must be a maternity wing, and once everybody vanished and there were so many other injuries and stuff, they must have closed it down and moved everybody over. But that maybe it just
convenient. It just seems weird. You would think that you would have somebody looking for people or whatever. You still have no idea what's going on. Okay, so when we go back to the plane at this point, but just to rewind a little bit, when he hits that other plane, Rayford Steele has Buck Williams, the journalist guy, go back. He says, go back and look at the wing and see if we're
take pictures of the wing.
Take pictures of the wing and see if we're losing fuel. And so he does, and there's the fuel catches fire. And so he goes up to report this to the captain. So at this point he gets up to the cockpit, and they can see the fire from the cockpit. He looks out the side and sees the fire happening. So at this point I'm wondering, why did he send him back to go look at it? He could see it all.
He wanted pictures from his camera so he could get a better look at the damage to see what pieces were
right, but you can see it all from the cockpit, and his camera has a huge lens on it. So in theory, it could take a picture from 20 feet away.
It's not that close. It's farther than I think you think it is. But
it's a telephoto lens, is all I'm saying.
He didn't have that big of a lens on it. I don't think that's a big hang up that they asked him to go take some photos of the wing.
My next note is heavy-handed religious symbolism. The whole movie is that, although
I don't know what not
really clever symbolism at all.
I'm not sure.
I don't remember what specific thing that was to. I try and usually give myself a little something to remind me when it's that generic of a note, but in this case I didn't, so I have no idea.
I don't know.
My next note was, so children and Christians are gone. And then the daughter goes to a church.
Well, she goes home first.
Her mom's gone.
Right. Is that
Then
where you saw the religious stuff? Because her mom's got like an
probably
altar and some other things that
an
are.
altar, yeah, and her necklace was like the Christian fish with like a cross in it.
Yeah. So like it's referenced earlier that this is a necklace that Nic gave her and she never takes it off. And then we find it's laying on the floor in the shower while the water is running.
Right.
So she's gone.
So yeah, then she goes to a church, and there's a pastor in the church,
It's
which
her
raises
mom's church
yes,
specifically.
it raises some questions as to
It
why this
does.
pastor is here.
Yes.
But yeah, then it's revealed that he just did it for the money essentially, and didn't really believe in any of it. It was just what he was good at, and convincing people to believe, and he himself didn't believe, so he was not a part of the rapture. So then we go back to the plane, and the mom of the little daughter that I mentioned that was talking about her football player dad, her mom was freaking out on the plane and had gotten a hold of the gun from the marshal that had disappeared.
I am glad that comes up because they keep cutting back to the
showing
marshal
the gun,
and like there's like I'm like where like who's got it, like are they gonna ever address the fact that the marshal's the armed person on the plane,
right? So
know?
then she has the gun and she's like threatening people, asking where her daughter is, and that she knows that it was them. I can't remember which person in specificity was who she was pointing it at, but she was pointing it at like one person. Do you remember who it was? Was it the Buck Williams guy?
No, I think she starts by pointing it actually at Martin Kleba's character Melvin at first, because what she thinks is she thinks her husband orchestrated all of this to take her daughter away.
Right.
Supposedly he thinks she's crazy. We don't really know exactly what that means because this is all coming from her and she's very distraught, but she thinks her husband's trying to take her daughter away, and he has paid off 300 people to orchestrate this way of stealing her daughter.
Because she was asleep, and she thought it happened while she was asleep. And so, yeah, she's like threatening to kill all these people. And then when
because like Buck is like, no, point it at me, point the gun at me. He keeps trying to get her to point it at him.
Yeah, because of course he's the hero.
He's the hero. It's him and Nic against the world.
She realizes at some point that this is not a joke. This is not something that was, and then so she points the gun at herself, and is like preparing to shoot herself in the heart, which is a really depressing scene. Also,
yes,
she doesn't. So that's good. I don't remember what exactly was said at this point to make me write this note. But my next note is the flight attendant is real judgy for someone who wanted to fuck a married pilot for U2 tickets. Because she went to some other character and was being like super judgmental about something. And it wasn't Nic Cage's character.
I don't know.
It was one of the passengers that she was like saying stuff to and being super judgy. And I'm like, this person has no room to be judging other people in any capacity.
Well, but here's the problem, though. We learned that she didn't know that Nic was married. So she just thinks she's flirting with this cool pilot guy and they're going to go have some fun in London. We actually don't learn at all what her sin is, other than, I mean, maybe she's just the non-believer. But is that if you don't know you're
still guilty of adultery, even if you don't know you're doing it? Yeah, it's still an act that you're doing. I mean, I don't know.
Messed up. I don't know.
I mean, you can still break rules even knowing that there's no rule on it. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that you haven't broken the law, if you do something that's illegal.
Sure. But like, your sentences change depending on,
but apparently there's
probation, things like that, right? This is a very all or nothing
no probation
situation.
With rapture.
Right. So this guy lied to you. So now you're doomed to hell
forever. Yeah.
Because you believed a lie. Okay.
So
that's harsh.
It is. Then we get this like really long bridge scene. So apparently the daughter, after she leaves the church, she's like running along the bridge, and the Golden Gate Bridge, I think it was.
It's not the Golden Gate.
Or I don't fucking know. It's some big bridge.
So that's in San Francisco. She's in New York.
Whatever. It's a big bridge in New York. Whatever.
It was it's probably the Washington.
I failed
Bridge.
Geography as a child. Okay.
The New York bridges all look the same. It was probably the Washington Bridge.
Yeah. So she's on this bridge. It was big and it was gold. Okay, give me a break. But she climbs up this ladder to go up to the top of the bridge, and it's just a really long scene of her like looking up the ladder and then climbing the ladder and then hanging out at the top.
Well, it's supposed to build the emotion that like she's gonna commit suicide.
Yeah, I know, but it's just a
Yeah.
really long scene. I don't think it needed to be that long. But I think at this point she finally gets reception on her phone from her dad, probably because she's so high in the air
But
on the
they
Golden
finally
Gate
get
Bridge.
reception because
Well, yeah, oh
they've
yeah,
got
that's true.
satellite phones that aren't working for some reason.
But yeah, she's so high on the Golden Gate Bridge that she finally can now pick up a phone call from her dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so they talk for like 2 seconds before they're cut off again because reasons. So yeah, then my next note is Nick is killing it. Oh, I think with the conversation with his daughter
Was good.
which yeah, it was really good. But also Buck Williams is just hanging out there for the conversation. He's listening to this like super private, super emotional conversation.
It was actually his phone.
Sure, but like,
But
take a step away if you know this guy's potentially talking to his daughter for the last time.
Buck's the co-star. He's got to stay in the shot.
So yeah, he just like hangs out while Nick is crying and emotional over what's going on because he found out his wife is gone and
his son.
And his son.
Right, but his daughter's still there.
It's a rough scene.
Yes.
And so, but he kills it. He did a great job with it. So then this is like right before he knows that. Okay, so at this point, he's contacted someone in air traffic control or whatever, and they've said that he can't land at the airport because all the runways are packed out. There's birds everywhere. It's dangerous.
Right.
We all know birds are really dangerous when it comes to planes. We've seen enough of that in movies.
He meant planes.
No. He said birds. So yeah, so he knows he can't land there. So he's talking about how, well, maybe I'm going to have to land on the water, even though earlier he said he couldn't land on the water. He thinks it might be possible at this point, but he still would rather not land on the water. He'd rather find a place that he could land on land where he wouldn't be killing a million people.
Well, I think his choices are that he either has to land on the water and they all die, or he'd have to like crash a bunch of buildings and kill other innocent people. Right.
And so when he's talking to his daughter, he's able to, before the phone call ends, let her know that, this is getting bad. I need a place with like a mile of runway, essentially, like a mile of road. And so just so happens she knows where that is. And so she goes to this construction.
To be fair, they do show it earlier in the movie.
They do.
To their credit.
So she goes to this road and like is plowing stuff out of the way with this car she stole, or this truck she stole.
You're forgetting she stole a motorcycle before she stole the truck. This like she can take care of herself.
Yeah, and it's funny. She stops the motorcycle in this place with like 7 or 8 trucks, and like all of them are like brand new, nice trucks, except for this one old beater ass truck. And that's the one that she gets to start. Well, I mean, to be fair, she only tries one other truck before that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the one she gets to start. So she takes that out and she's starting to like clear all this construction stuff off of the road and push stuff out of the way. And then they get a hold of her again. And she says, I've got a place for you. And they said, okay, well, we need a big sign. So like some big light, some bright light to show me where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And so she finds a like can of gasoline and she pours it onto this big pile of stuff and blows it up.
Yeah, baby.
To show them where to land.
I mean, she really shows up at the end of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, she's the hero.
She saves like 200 people.
Yeah, so they're also trying to raise tension by saying that he told her he needs a mile. And she measures it out while she's like clearing all the roadway of construction stuff. And she says it's 0.9. And he says, that's fine, sweetie. And then he leans over to Buck and says, that's not enough. We're going to die. I'm just trying to make her feel better. I don't want her to feel like she screwed up. And so it turns out it is enough.
Just barely, man. By like a foot.
Yeah. And so they land the plane and nobody on the plane dies. And the daughter runs and hugs Buck, like huge hug.
As she's running, there's an explosion that doesn't impact anything other than the fact that you can see her run past an explosion.
Right. And yeah, and she, before she even hugs her dad, she hugs Buck. like really big hug for like you would like I would hug you if I haven't seen you in
Aw.
years and you were about to die and then you were alive.
And then I was alive.
You know what I mean? Like, but they knew each other for like 10 minutes, and then it was so emotional. And then she goes and finds her dad and hugs him,
Mm-hmm.
and that's basically the end of the movie. But
Well, oh no. So at the end, um, you know, I believe it's Nick says, "So this is the end of the world," and then she goes, "No, this is only the beginning."
right, trying to set up a whole series.
That's the end of the movie.
So basically, what I want to end, this movie discussion with is to just say that we thought we were watching a movie about the rapture and like the impact on it and everything, but what we were really watching is a movie about Nic Cage landing a plane. Basically. And the rapture is just like a secondary thing that happens.
It just kind of happens.
And it's not really necessary to the plot. It's just Nic Cage landing a plane. That's the big takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, you could basically rewrite this movie. This is Airplane. This is the movie Airplane with none of the jokes.
Right, exactly. The rapture is a totally secondary thing to just him landing the plane. That's the whole movie.
Right? Like, that's just right. The plane is damaged at one point. You could have done that another way. The co-pilot is out of commission. You could have done that another way, had him get sick or something, right? Like, there's not like this. It is an airplane crash movie.
Yeah, so like you don't even have to have the passengers disappear. Like the people in the plane, that's just a method of adding drama to the things that are happening into the plane. It doesn't really affect the overall plot at all. Mm-hmm. That was very weird in that aspect. I thought it was going to focus more on the rapture, but no, it's really just about Nic Cage landing a plane.
It's odd, right? It's like there's two separate movies happening that are very loosely connected to each other. I mean, there's some cool moments in here, like when the passengers are all going crazy and Nick basically cuts the oxygen and makes everyone go into oxygen masks. That was kind of a badass move, I gotta say. I was like, that's hardcore.
If it had happened in real life, I don't know if it would be considered a badass move to play with people's health like that.
I mean, like they were gonna break down the door into the cockpit and then they're all dead anyway.
I mean, they wouldn't kill the pilot.
They wouldn't kill the pilot necessarily, but like none of them know how to fly one of those planes.
That's what I was saying. That's why they wouldn't kill the pilot.
No, you don't think they were going to barge in there and then like they're all like going crazy and the plane's just slowly taking a dive down into the ocean?
No, I think that they are smart. People are smart, Derek.
A person. What's the line? A person is smart. People are dumb. What's the line from Independence Day?
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
We did skip over the revelation though when Hattie finds out that Steele is married. So he makes her gather. There was another flight attendant who vanished. Apparently, they only had 2 flight attendants for this giant plane that was going across the Atlantic Ocean. But whatever.
Go figure.
And he has her get her things, this woman's things. And he's going through the co-pilot's things. And he's looking for signs that these people are religious because he's trying to figure out what happened. And he thinks he's figured it out. And so he sees that the co-pilot's watch has John 3:16 on it. And then he gets this other woman's this flight attendant's purse. He's looking through this notebook and there's something in there about a church group meeting,
like a Bible camp or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Bible study, I think. Yeah. And that's when he explains to Hattie what he thinks is happening, that it's the rapture or whatever. And she's very confused. She's like, you've never talked about religion or God before. Like, where is this coming from? And he's like, it's from my wife. And that's where you find out she didn't know.
Yeah, which is not really that big of a revelation.
I mean, it is and it isn't, right? Because like this whole time,
it's supposed to be, but it's not really. Like there's no like collective audience gasp or anything like that at this moment. It's just like, okay, I guess she knows now.
Well, it changed some things for me because in that moment I was like, well then, so she didn't do anything wrong.
I mean, she committed adultery.
Well, you know what I mean. Maybe it's a personal thing, right? But like if that were to happen, to me, if I was cheated on, but the person didn't tell the third person, I'm not like, I can't blame that third person for doing something they didn't know.
But you aren't God.
No, I'm not. I guess I'm nicer.
We're not going to get into that. Nicer than the God in this film. I'll
in
say.
this film. Yeah, like
Not the
I,
general.
but like then
Christian
there's
God.
like the older woman, right? This is a woman who has lost her mental faculties and now her husband vanishes and she's older, she's clearly an older woman, right? Her older husband who's there taking care of her in some respect, he vanishes in the rapture. She's left there with all this stuff going on, guns being pulled, people being called terrorists, mass, the oxygen masks coming down, all of this stuff, and she's there like
Doing nothing.
it just feels so messed up to me. But
This also raises a bunch of questions about, so there's a lot of monotheistic religions out there that believe in a God very similar to the Christian God.
Sure.
But did those people go? Because otherwise, like, the United States is going to lose a shit ton of people, but then other countries are not going to lose that many.
It's a complicated thing, right? Because the idea would be it's supposed to be people who believe in the rapture, not those who believe in the Judeo-Christian God or even the Abrahamic God, right?
So, but then you have
Jewish people and Muslim people would theoretically then not.
But every religion has something similar to rapture. Like, Nordic religions have Ragnarok. There's things
but
like
not
that in a
this.
lot of
This
different
is
religions.
this is a very specific one because it's supposed to lead to 7 years of darkness and all of these other things,
Sure,
right?
but so because they didn't believe in the exact thing, but they believed in something similar, they're automatically left out.
I mean, that's what a lot of religions believe about even just normal, like the sects of Christianity argue with each other all of the time about who gets to go to heaven versus hell, and they're just pieces of the same basic religion.
They're all supposed to be friends,
right? Like, and that's just not the case. I mean, like I said, I'm Jewish. Jewish people argue about it all the time. There's actually a joke that if you have 10 Jewish people in a room and you ask what Judaism is, you'll get 11 answers. So like that's just, in my personal experience, how the major religions function. And when I say major, I mean the ones that have the largest following base.
right?
Well,
I mean, I guess we'll never get a follow up to this, so we'll never know, how this universe handles that.
Yeah, this one didn't get a sequel, but Kirk Cameron's 2000 movie got 2 sequels. So, there was one called that came out actually this year. That what's his name? McDonough is in. That's called Left Behind: Rise of the Antichrist. But I'm unclear if it's a sequel to this or not.
We're just gonna say no
because it takes place like during the like during the fall, like after the rapture, and so I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a continuation of this story or not.
We should rate this movie and put it on the board.
All right. By the way, of the 16 million, 3.5 was for Nick.
He deserved it.
By the way,
he probably deserved more of that.
All right. So we rate our movies overall quality and then overall caginess, 0 to 20, 0 low, 20 high. And I think I kicked things off last time. Maybe.
It doesn't matter.
Really
I can go first if you want.
All right. What's your quality score here?
I mean, some of the practical effects were pretty decent, but overall the movie was pretty terrible. I'm thinking like a 5.
5?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's fair. That kind of puts it below Next. I prefer Next.
I agree.
It puts it, for you, that puts it right above Inconceivable, which I had Inconceivable a little bit higher.
I didn't like Inconceivable, so
I preferred Inconceivable to this for a lot of various reasons. So you gave 211 a 5. I think I'm going to give this a 4.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a 4. I think that's my thing there. Then we've got caginess. I mean, I can't even think of a moment.
There wasn't. He played it very straight.
So like, I mean, we gave Joe a 1. Is this just a 1?
Yeah, I'm going to say it's a 1.
Okay. All right. So 1 for caginess, 4.5 for quality, which puts it kind of in an interesting spot there. And then we got to figure out what movie is going to join the wheel o Cage. So we, spin our wheel to find out what movie's next. What will be replacing Left Behind is Season of the Witch. Will be joining the wheel. So to find out which Nicolas Cage movie we're going to be talking about next on the show, check out our Wheel o Cage segment that comes out on alternating Mondays at comingofcage.com. You can catch it on all of our social media apps or our YouTube channel. You can also play Cage Bingo with us if you want. We have a segment for that as well to find out if our Cage Bingo, if anybody got a bingo. Hasn't happened yet, but it's only a matter of time. So eventually it's going to happen. Anything else, Ryan, for Left Behind?
No, I'm glad I don't have to watch it again.
Fantastic. All right. Well, and that's it for us, the Coming of Cage podcast, comingofcage.com. We will catch you next time. I'm Derek. That's Ryan.
Peace out.